Well, honestly, there hasn't been a merge of b-boys in the 90s, but in the millennium there's been a merge of crumpers.
Okay.
Those crumpers actually, if bona, they could have a sense of understanding the element yabo for how long it's been around, they could actually see what they are doing actually, it belongs from breakdancing, but now it's just been incorporated more in a tempo fast and expression, but Krumper originally is a b-boy, but the crumpers of today, they don't know the essence of isugepi from the b-boy, yeah, well, because the b-boy was always breaking, he breaks, and today because there's TV and because music videos that today there's a lot of people doing expression in cramping. So I say to a lot of young people about the cramping, they need to study about the cramping itself, because if we would go back to a documentary that was made from the West Coast about cramping, it was an expression where black people from the working class themselves were they release tension more not to be violence amongst each other, because even the man who started cramping is an ex-gang member. So he saw a need of organizing abantu abatsha ba release the tension in a way of not actually be physical from each other. We hear that today the crampers, most of what they have to wear is so expensive, but it is a tool that we could use for abantu abatsha baphinde babuyele backwards with steps of breakdancing, because a lot of crampers abazazi the fundamentals, basics of just breakdancing, of the six-step. All they know is just the dancing. So I would say to anyone who's a crumper today, go back and study about breakdancing, and we incorporated your breakdancing. One person who has managed to answer something similar to the idea in the theater is Usamwid. Usamwid, he uses the football juggling, but the way how he juggles with the ball, he has incorporated breakdancing. So I call him one of the first football breaker Zalape Cape Town, who has managed to take Ebola, something that's very popular from the township, I incorporated with the culture and hip hop, that's breakdancing, not just like playing Ebola, doing skills, but showing that when as a breaker, there's so much you could do out there, and uyenza even nabantu abanganathando of breakdancing or abangana interest to the culture of hip hop, ibe something very close to them, because the football in the black townships of South Africa, it's the most thing that's easy to get abantu abatsha to communicate by use as a weapon yabo, because if football, even in the 80s at Cape Town, it was used as a tool, your organizer. A lot of young black people, babe military mindset, it was used as a tool of camouflage, kakutrainwa abantu kwi-soccer fields like komagugulethu, komanyanga, komalanga, where the white Afrikaners, the apartheid, babesika bebona abantu basefieldini babona abantu abajime football, but bengayazi uba there was the military training. So even today, singayuza in many ways the breakdancing, the expression of us discipline, because each and every move as a breaker, there's danger. So you need to be very concerned about your body, how you use the body language, how you do it, stands up, and it makes you very fit, very healthy too. No, honestly, even that's something that even today Gas Theatre with the likes of Zanzolo or your coasters, where we say we would love to see a merge of black breakers, because we as black people, the only element we have tended to stick to, it's rap, because the excess of raps ibone through TV. If you would go to the so-called colored community without not offending the Cape Malaysian people, the Khoisan, because when they started in the 80s, they was incorporate Zoifo as elements of as the art form, and the fifth element of his self-knowledge. I remember once I went to go watch he play Barber shop, Barber shop, Joe's barber shop, who focus on the so-called colored community. Yabo. So pana, there's one guy, they used to go a Roxy, where Wabugela, who break street. You know, all these first hip hop documentaries on breakdancing, he had an Babe exposed Guzwe, you know, because of the colored people, even in upper 80s, South Africa, Babe in between. Yeah, but so as Nizinda, they got quickly exposed to Zona. And when I did my research, just trying to find about how hip hop began in Cape Town, I discovered there's a man right now, Obey Misha's Plain, who established the Universal Zulu Nation chapter, a South African chapter, in the late 80s. So Latata, who brought that information, did not just bring one element to them, because he brought the 4 elements and he brought the self-knowledge. It's just a pity, I don't know his name, but the last time I had this conversation, Rosano knows Lotata, you know, because Nam Lotata, I would love actually to bring him Kwamum Sedins, because this is something that in the 90s, Zang and Eve so much, but Chu went the research, and then I realized no food in what he got Emil from Good Black Noise, where he talks about Lotata, where even in Misha's Plain there was a chapter of Zulu Nation. So it made me very curious to want to but if there was a chapter of Zulu Nation in Cape Town, how come ingakwazanga le legacy yayo ikhule and to a point that it resurrected nakwezinye corners of the Cape Flats? Because considering the Cape Flats, we're not talking about the Khoisan people alone. We are talking about where the working class is. That would be the black people, Amaxhosa, Abesuthu, Abatswana, everyone who belong in the working class, yabo, all up in Cape Town is part of the Cape Flats. So yeah, the land by Cape Flats identifies Ndabenzethu as Hanover Park, Misha's Plain, but wherever there's the working class people, that's the Cape Flats. So Nam Latata, I would love really to spend more time now and find, because he brought something that was very powerful. I have a couple of questions now. I'm going about how did he find about the Zulu Nation itself, you know, and the idea, yabo, gela question, anyone babefuna we bring, because the Khoisan people, bona, but they are part of the first generation in hip hop in Cape Town, in South Africa, where it was the time of the state emergence of the apartheid, where it was very easy for them to identify their enemy, because the enemy of the day was the regime government. You know, today it might be very hard for the MC of today, who's not well informed, to understand his enemy of the day. Omnia might not see a need of actually writing against government with neoliberalism. That's only 20 years of democracy, because the ideal of democracy is put in as we all free. Because I remember the first election, or before the first election, in POC, babe perform a grand parade. And in POC, le record yaboka 97. Then I think this is after our first election, where from Ghetto Code, where they had a track that was called A Tara, where they had a voice Katatu Nelson Mandela, a reciter, one of his speeches that was a reciter upper in Cape Town, Upumabaka, never again shall I. And they were performing and they were part of a transformation of today South Africa existed, where they were fighting the apartheid, where even in POC went to exile Botswana to go release a record. And this is something that I read from a small document, where that document, and that's why in a circulating so much, where hip hoppers they could have this document, you know. But just to read from that record, where as a young man, he records the POC Zangan was accessor as women teenager, but through Namuba Curious then and I managed with money MP3 from remember a POC Zonges are records zabo. And I went through them understanding this was the record that had Mr. Devious, you know, where I knew Mr. Devious when Mr. Devious came out with his work, but I never knew that Mr. Devious was featured on a POC record. Yeah, well, and so it POC, the work they did, it was so powerful that to a point that when I look at SOS Collective Nguyo today, I see ourselves as abantu who are carrying that legacy, like who heal the hood, low established by Black Noise. What they are doing, it's the same what they did in the 80s, in the 90s, where like Emil himself, for our first elections, he went around to the so-called colored schools, where empowering the so-called colored people to know the importance of them voting for a black government, because the enemy of the day, it was the Afrikaner government, yeah, where Emil himself, he was even invited by African Bambata, where the information existed with Emil, where I released, where he has an image in African Bambata, because without African Bambata, you know, he himself, when he came to Africa, and when he came to South Africa, himself, he got to understand what was happening in South Africa, and he met a Zulu chief, who was that Zulu chief. And when he went back to the US, that's the time when he established a movement that was called the organization, before it was called the Zulu Nation, that today is as the Universal Zulu Nation. So, I'm invited America because without African Bambata, he was one of abanye abantu in America that was campaigning for black people to be free in South Africa, where he was using rap and spread a message, a culture, a hip hop. Where even in one of the documents you took a picture, there's a part I've highlighted, Pana, where without African Bambata went to Europe and they did a big concert fundraising for Congolese, ANC, the ruling party. But if you go back with history books, the ANC, they don't talk about how hip hop has played a role to shape where South Africa is today, you know. Like, these are things that ezingathethwa ngazo so much, and to a point that it made me be curious. One, why do I say this? That African Bambata came to South Africa. That African Bambata would not name his movement the Zulu Nation if wefikele Zimbabwe or wefikele Kenya or in Nigeria, because the Zulu Nation, it's a tribe, it's a South Africa that's called the Zulu, and he named himself after one of the greatest warriors that defeated the English people, Chief Bambata, because Chief Bambata in the 20th century defeated the British people, and he names himself Bambata. So if the man himself, Bambata, who's the father of hip hop, named himself Bambata, engazange South Africa, that would be a misinterpretation of information. You met Emil when Emil was organizing a campaign for the first time up in South Africa, for our first elections in '94. So he actually invited Emil to the US, and Emil got to meet Tatu African Bambata, because Tatu African Bambata, the role he played a big role with hip hop in America. Because Utatu Bambata is an ex-gang member, where he was a leader of a gang that was called the Black Spade, where Utatu Bambata somehow got invited by the American government. I don't know how an ex-gang member gets invited by the American government. Obama got part of a competition to write an essay about Africa. And Yani, why bala the competition, and he came to Africa. So it's a piece of history that's not been shared so much. I wish even Otatu Bambata could look at it, how he could share his work, where there could be more of the footage we could see, you know. And because influence played a big role for us around the world as Abanabamnyama, for us to find dignity, identity, self-expression, and to know that there's another form of us we could be, and another way of Sikwazi communicating to the world with us becoming gang members or becoming uneducated, because the Universal Zulu Nation talks about the importance of self-knowledge. The first thing that we would need to do as the community as a Kailicha is to work in hand with the likes of Heal the Hood, because they have e-practitioners who are break dancers. And sikwazi ubonisa to young people that are coming out there with spaces you don't need to MC. You could become a break dancer, you could become a DJ. Like right now, at Woodstock, there's a school of turntablism that's run by one of the first DJs that's old up already, you know, where they have sessions where people themselves need izinto uzbiza in their own communities, because somehow whatever sifuna yenze with community to, we're the people that have to call it. If siyabona there's a lack, we're gonna have about to invite people about the practitioners also, facilitate workshops, sessions, bring documentaries, people they could watch out there, let people go with hip hop indaba, because the hip hop indaba right now in Cape Town is the only space that's practicing the culture of hip hop to the fullest. Zonke elements are. It does not mean there's new space that are out there, the people that are doing hip hop jam, that's not hip hop. It is hip hop, but it just carries one element, you know. So hip hop in our space where we should come together and network, not as this space is born, but it belongs to the so-called colors. No. If we are saying hip hop, it's colorless. We should be incorporating hip hop in the going to the Mitchell's Plains, people from the Mitchell's Plains coming to our communities, because we are the only people that's going to change the idea of how we want to live as hip hoppers, and we are the only people that's going to change the community, because we, the MC, the turntablist, the graph writer, the breaker, CZ messengers. So our role out there is to change people's mind and make people to understand that Mitchell's Plains in Kailicha, it's not different. It's one. The same corporation that's hitting us, or ShopRite or Pick and Pay, they're the one running things. Tina, we're just consumers. How do we create our own market? How do we create our own culture, see, preserve in our own community? Like, one thing about the Cape Malaysian people, the Khoisan, one thing they have managed to keep as the heritage, yabo, every year they have the Kloppies. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. Yeah, but each generation that's growing gets to understand the sense of la culture, where it comes from, where, I mean, we as black people, kasbabona, they say grandparent, we don't know really what indoni lebazama usbonisa yona of the slavery they went through, because a lot of people, they don't know that how painted your lips red, or like these symbols is that were used against black people, undermine. So when kabesenza ezazinto, or them today abanye baba benganaba the front teeth, it was not because of choice as a generation. Abanye babo, it was ukuchwa ngenkani amazinyo beforced ukutya while they were coming down up to the Cape, yabo izinto ezazinto. So sometimes for us to heal, we have to touch where it hurts the most, because for them, that's why today they have managed even to identify themselves by the Afrikaans, because they have seen themselves, the dialect that they have created, that's the Afrikaans, it's not the Dutch Afrikaans. You know, if even the Afrikaners stole the language from them. So today, Afrikaans, they are very clear that the Afrikaans they're speaking, it's not the Afrikaans that's spoken by the Afrikaners, because they have created their own means of finding new words, swinging words that has been in that language, in a medium, yabo communicate. So it's the same with us, rappers that are from Ekugule to Walanga, Kailicha, Delft, whatever we see put in our raps, even if it's Tsotsital, you understand that Tsotsital, it's a language that belongs to Estraduan. So take it and preserve it, and we try to say to the next level, that the next generation could know the terms that were used in a certain time, for it ikwazi uphila ilife yayo.